October 1944, 3rd Army Headquarters, France. The mail came every morning. Dozens of letters, most of them routed directly to the correspondence staff. Standard procedure, condolence requests, complaints, inquiries. The staff handled them. Patton never saw most of them. But Major Davenport had learned over 2 years to recognize the ones that were different. This one was different. He read the first paragraph standing at the mail table. Then he sat down and read the rest. Then he walked it to Patton's desk himself. Patton was reviewing maps. He looked up, saw Davenport's face. He took the letter without asking what it was. He read it in 3 minutes. Then he set it down and looked out the window for a long time. The letter was from a woman named Margaret Colton, 53 years old, from a small town outside Columbus, Ohio. Her son, Private First Class Robert Colton, had been killed 6 weeks earlier during a river crossing in France, 21 years old. 3rd Army, Patton's command. The letter was not what Davenport had expected it to be when he first saw the handwriting on the envelope. It was not angry. It was not demanding. It was not asking for explanations or apologies. It was asking for one thing only. She had written, "I know you are very busy and that many mothers have lost sons, and I am not asking for special treatment. I am only asking for the truth, not the official truth. The truth. Was my son afraid at the end? Was he in pain? Was he alone? These are the questions that keep me awake. I have the official letter. It tells me he died in service of his country and that he was brave. I know he was brave. I raised him. I am asking you to tell me something the official letter cannot. Please." Patton read the letter twice more that afternoon. This is what he wrote back. "Before we continue, make sure you subscribe. We tell the World War II stories that show what the war cost the people who weren't in it." Margaret Colton had not expected a response. She had sent the letter because not sending it had become impossible. Because she had been lying awake for 6 weeks composing it in her head, and writing it down and mailing it was the only way to stop. She had addressed it to General Patton because Robert had spoken of him in his letters home. Not always reverently. Robert was not a reverent young man, but with a particular kind of respect that Margaret recognized. The respect you had for someone you knew was paying attention. She had not expected the general to be paying attention to her. The response arrived 3 weeks later. Not a typed form letter, not a staff reply on official stationery. A handwritten letter, 4 pages. Patton's own handwriting, which she would later describe to her sister as the handwriting of a man who wrote quickly and meant every word. She read it at the kitchen table on a Tuesday afternoon in November. The autumn light coming through the window. The house quiet in the way houses are quiet when someone who used to live in them is gone. She read it 4 times before she put it down. Patton had not known Robert Colton personally. 3rd Army had 250,000 men. No general knew them personally. But when he decided to respond to Margaret's letter himself, he had done something first. He had called for the after-action report from the river crossing. He had called for the names of the men in Robert's unit who survived. He had asked Davenport to reach 2 of them by telephone. It took 4 days. Then he sat down and wrote. He wrote, "Mrs. Colton, I am going to answer your questions as honestly as I can. I will tell you what the men who were with your son told me. I will not make anything better than it was because you asked me not to, and because you deserve the respect of the truth." He wrote, "Your son was not alone. He was with his unit. He was with men he had trained with and fought beside for 8 months. In my experience, which is considerable, men in that situation are not alone in the way civilians fear. They are held by the presence of the men beside them in a way that is difficult to describe to someone who has not experienced it. Robert was held that way." He wrote, "Was he afraid?" "Yes." Every soldier is afraid at a river crossing. The ones who tell you otherwise are lying, or they have stopped feeling things entirely, and neither of those is something to want for your son. Fear in a soldier is not weakness. It is proof that he understood the situation clearly and went forward anyway. That is the only real definition of courage I have ever found. Robert had it. He wrote, "Was he in pain? I am going to tell you what the men told me, and I am going to trust you to receive it. He was hit once. It was fast. The men who were with him said it was fast. I cannot tell you it was painless because I don't know that, and I won't pretend to. But I can tell you it was fast, and in my experience of war, fast is the mercy that the situation allows." He wrote, "I want to tell you one more thing. The men I spoke to told me something about your son that was not in the official report because official reports don't have room for it. They told me that at the crossing before the order came, when the men were waiting on the bank, which is the worst moment, the waiting, Robert made a joke. I don't know what the joke was. The man I spoke to couldn't remember it exactly, but he remembered that it landed, that the men around him laughed, that for a moment the waiting was bearable. He wrote, "A man who makes the men around him laugh when they are afraid is not a small thing. I have commanded 250,000 soldiers, and I am telling you that is not a small thing. It is, in fact, one of the rarest things there is." He wrote, "I am sorry for what you have lost. I am sorry in the specific way that a man who sent your son to that river can be sorry, which is not the same as ordinary sorrow. I carry the names of the men who have died in my command. I carry them because it is the only thing I can do that is proportionate to what they gave. Robert's name is among them now." He wrote, "You asked me for the truth. I hope this is close enough to it to give you some rest." He signed it, G.S. Patton, General. Margaret read the letter 4 times that Tuesday afternoon. Then she folded it carefully and placed it in the wooden box on her dresser where she kept the things that mattered most. Robert's first school photograph, a letter he'd written her from basic training, his father's watch. She wrote back the following week, a short letter. She told Patton that the part about the joke had done something she hadn't expected. She said, "I knew he would do that. I could hear him doing that. You gave him back to me for a moment in a way I can't fully explain. I am grateful." She wrote, "I have one more question if you'll allow it. The official letter said he died in service of his country. You are the man who asked him to die in service of his country. I am not asking this in anger. I am asking it sincerely. Was it worth it? Was the crossing worth what it cost?" The letter sat on Patton's desk for 2 days. He had received versions of this question before, from politicians, from journalists, from officers who had lost men and needed the answer to keep going. He had always answered it the same way, with certainty, with the conviction of a man who had to believe the answer was yes in order to function. This time he sat with it for 2 days. Then he wrote back. He wrote, "Mrs. Colton, you asked a general's question in a mother's voice, and you deserve both kinds of answer." He wrote, "The general's answer is yes. The crossing achieved its objective. The ground taken that day was held. The men who died there shortened the war by a calculation I can make with some confidence, though never with certainty. In military terms, the cost was proportionate to the result. That is the general's answer, and it is true." He wrote, "The mother's answer is harder. No specific crossing, no specific objective, no specific calculation is worth a specific son. That is also true. These two truths sit beside each other and do not resolve. I have spent 30 years in the military trying to find a framework that resolves them, and I have not found one. I do not believe one exists." He wrote, "What I can tell you is this. Your son went to that river because he believed something was worth defending. Not an objective on a map, something larger. The men I have commanded, the ones I have known, They do not die for generals. They do not die for governments. They die for the men beside them and for the idea that some things matter enough to protect. Robert believed that. He showed it every day he stayed. He wrote, "I cannot tell you it was worth it in the way you need to hear it. No one can. But I can tell you that what your son did was not wasted. That is the closest I can come to the answer you're looking for." I am sorry it isn't closer. Margaret kept both letters for the rest of her life. She showed them to almost no one. Her sister read them once. Her pastor read them once years later when she was preparing her affairs. The pastor told her afterward that in 40 years of ministry he had read a great many letters of condolence from a great many people of faith and position, and that Patton's letters were unlike any of them. He said, "Most letters of condolence tell the bereaved what they want to hear. These letters told you what was true. They trusted you with the truth. That is rarer than kindness." Margaret said, "I know. That's why I kept them." She died in 1971. The letters were found in the wooden box on her dresser, alongside Robert's school photograph and his father's watch. Her daughter, who handled the estate, didn't know what to do with them at first. They were obviously significant. She could tell that from how they were kept. She reached out to a military historian who had been collecting personal correspondence from the war years. He drove to Columbus to see them. He later wrote in his notes, "I have read thousands of wartime documents, official reports, field communications, letters home, diaries. The Colton letters are unusual in a way I find difficult to categorize. They are the record of a general choosing twice to answer a grieving woman honestly instead of comfortably. The second letter in particular, with its acknowledgement that the two truths do not resolve, is unlike anything I have seen in official or unofficial military correspondence from the period." He paused in his notes and then he wrote, "It is possible that Patton was a better man than his reputation suggests. It is also possible that writing to Margaret Colton was the one place in the war where he allowed himself to be uncertain out loud. I don't know which. Both may be true. Patton never mentioned the letters publicly. Davenport, who had handed him the original letter from Margaret, wrote about the exchange in his private journals. He described watching Patton spend the better part of an afternoon writing the first response, crossing things out, starting again. He wrote, "I had never seen him write anything more than once. He was not a man who revised. That afternoon he revised 3 times. He was trying to get something exactly right, and the something was not tactical." He wrote, "When he finally sealed the envelope, he sat for a moment without moving. Then he said one thing. He said, 'I hope she can sleep now.' He didn't say anything else. He picked up the next report and went back to work. But I remembered it. I remembered it because in 2 years of working for the general, it was the only time I heard him express hope about something he couldn't control. Everything else he controlled. The crossing, the advance, the objective, the outcome. He commanded all of it. But whether a woman in Ohio would be able to sleep, that he could not command. He could only hope. And hoping, for Patton, was something different, something harder. What would you have written to Margaret Colton? Could you have answered her questions honestly? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want more World War II stories, the ones about what the war cost the people who weren't in it, make sure you subscribe.